Why does my pulse spike when you're near? Human. An alien's first taste of emotion *, the analytical approach ambassador Kestravan adjusted her neural implants settings for the third time that morning, ensuring her emotional suppressors were functioning at optimal capacity. The sleek silver ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, carrying her toward what the Sirene High Council considered a routine diplomatic assessment. Her mission was simple: evaluate whether humanity possessed the intellectual maturity to join the United Stellar Accord. The Sirene had perfected themselves over millennia, engineering away the chaotic emotional responses that had once plagued their ancestors. They were logic incarnate, efficiency personified. Kestra's pale blue skin bore the intricate neural pathways that marked her as one of the most advanced of her kind, a living computer, capable of processing vast amounts of data without the interference of primitive feelings. Dr. Nathan Cade waited at the landing platform, his brown hair tousled by the artificial wind generated by the ship's engines. As Earth's foremost xenobiologist and cultural liaison, he had prepared extensively for this moment. The folder in his hands contained years of research on Sirene psychology, though he suspected much of it was theoretical at best. Ambassador Vin. Nathan extended his hand in greeting, a gesture he'd learned was considered respectfully formal by Sirene standards. Welcome to Earth. Kestra approached with measured steps, her elongated limbs moving with mechanical precision. But as she reached for his hand, something unexpected happened. Her internal sensors registered an anomaly, a 12% increase in cardiac rhythm, a subtle elevation in neural activity. She paused, her large violet eyes studying the readings on her wrist display. Is there a problem? Nathan asked, his voice carrying genuine concern. Negative, Kestra replied, though her tone held a note of uncertainty she'd never experienced before. My biosystems are recalibrating to your planet's atmospheric conditions. The lie came easily, but it troubled her. Sirene didn't lie. There was no logical purpose to deception when truth was more efficient. Yet, something about this human's presence made her want to conceal her readings, though she couldn't compute why. Over the following days, Nathan guided Kestra through various aspects of human society. They visited schools where children laughed and played concepts that fascinated and confused her. She watched couples hold hands in parks, her sensors detecting the chemical releases that accompanied what humans called affection. Why do your species engage in such inefficient behaviors? She asked during one of their walks through Central Park. The energy expenditure for emotional expression could be better allocated to productive endeavors. Nathan stopped beside a pond where ducks glided across the water. Because efficiency isn't everything, Ambassador. These emotions you're observing, they're not bugs in our programming. They're features. They drive us to create art, to sacrifice for others, to push beyond pure logic into something greater. Kestra's neural implant hummed as it processed this concept. But again, her biosystems betrayed her. Standing close to Nathan, watching the way sunlight caught the amber flecks in his eyes, her pulse elevated beyond normal parameters. Her skin temperature increased by 0.7 degrees. Most disturbing of all, she found herself wanting to step closer rather than maintaining the regulation 2-meter distance her protocols demanded. Dr. Cade, she said, her voice losing its usual mechanical cadence, I need to ask you something. That isn't in my mission parameters. Of course. What is it? She looked down at her wrist display, watching the erratic patterns of her vital signs. Why does my pulse spike when you're near? Human. This response, it isn't part of the protocol. My emotional suppressors are functioning normally, yet I'm experiencing what can only be described as irregularities. Nathan's expression softened, and for the first time since her arrival, Kestra noticed the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he looked at her with what humans might call tenderness. Maybe, he said gently, your suppressors aren't as foolproof as your people believe. Maybe what you're feeling isn't an irregularity at all. Maybe it's the most natural thing in the universe. That night, alone in her quarters, Kestra stared at her reflection and wondered if she was beginning to malfunction, or if she was finally beginning to function properly. Diagnostic failurist Sirene Medical Bay aboard the diplomatic vessel hummed with diagnostic equipment as Kestra submitted herself to a comprehensive systems check. She had reported the anomalies to her ship's AI, requesting a full analysis of her neural implants and emotional suppressors, all systems operating within normal parameters. The AI announced in its crystalline voice, "No mechanical failures detected. Emotional suppression at 99.7% efficiency." Yet the readings were undeniable. Every time she prepared for another day with Dr. Cade, her biosystems registered what could only be called anticipation. When she saw him waiting for her each morning, that strange cardiac acceleration returned. And when their hands accidentally touched while reviewing documents, her neural pathways lit up like a constellation. Perhaps, Kestra murmured to herself, the diagnostic protocols are insufficient. That morning, Nathan had planned a visit to a human art museum. As they stood before a painting depicting two lovers embracing beneath a starlit sky, Kestra found herself studying Nathan's reflection in the glass rather than the artwork itself. "What do you see when you look at this?" Nathan asked. "Inefficient use of pigments and canvas to depict biological urges," Kestra replied automatically, but her voice lacked conviction. The time invested in creating this could have been allocated to infrastructure development or scientific advancement. Nathan turned to face her, and she noticed how the museum's soft lighting brought out the warmth in his features. "But what do you feel when you look at it?" The question struck her like a lightning bolt. Feel. The concept was supposed to be alien to her, yet as she gazed at the painting, something stirred within her chest cavity, a sensation she had no words for. In her language, I experience a resonance," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "The figures appear to be sharing something intangible yet valuable. Their proximity suggests mutual selection, connection," Nathan offered softly. "They're sharing connection, love, love." Kestra repeated the word as if tasting something foreign yet delicious. "Your species considers this emotion essential. For many of us, it's what makes life worth living." Over the following weeks, Nathan introduced her to music, to literature, to the simple pleasure of sharing meals without discussing nutritional optimization. Each experience chipped away at something inside her, revealing layers she hadn't known existed. They spent evenings on the observation deck of her ship, Nathan pointing out Earth's constellations while sharing stories from human mythology. Kestra found herself memorizing not just the factual content, but the way his voice rose and fell, the gestures he made with his hands, the way he laughed when she asked particularly analytical questions about human courtship rituals. "Why do humans engage in dating?" she asked one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. "To find someone who complements us," Nathan explained. "Someone who challenges us to be better than we are alone." Kestra processed this information while watching Nathan's profile against the dying light. Without conscious decision, she moved closer on the bench they shared, reducing the distance between them from regulation to meters to less than one. "Dr. Cade," she said, her voice carrying a new quality she couldn't identify. "I believe I'm experiencing a system malfunction." "What kind of malfunction?" She gestured to her wrist display, showing him the chaotic patterns of her vital signs. "When you're near, my biosystems become unpredictable. I find myself prioritizing your presence over mission objectives. I've begun to enjoy our conversations beyond their informational value. Most concerning of all, I've started to imagine scenarios where our assignments might be extended indefinitely." Nathan's hand moved toward hers, stopping just short of contact. "Kestra, what if it's not a malfunction? What if what you're experiencing is exactly what it's supposed to be?" "That's impossible. My people eliminated these inefficiencies millennia ago." Maybe they eliminated something important instead, as if to prove his point. Her neural implant registered another spike in activity as he said her name, not her title, not her formal designation, but simply Kestra, spoken with a warmth that made her feel like more than the sum of her engineered parts. That night, she lay in her sterile quarters staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction they'd shared. For the first time in her existence, efficiency seemed less important than the inexplicable joy she felt when Nathan smiled at her, when he listened to her observations with genuine interest, when he looked at her as if she were not a diplomatic asset but simply herself. The revelation terrified her more than any system failure ever could. Awakening protocolder, Nathan Cade noticed the change in Kestra immediately. Where once she had moved with mechanical precision, now there was a subtle fluidity to her gestures, a warmth in her violet eyes that hadn't existed before. Her questions had evolved from purely analytical inquiries to something deeper, more personal. "Nathan," she said over breakfast. She had begun using his first name without the formal title. "Another deviation from Siren protocol. I've been analyzing human emotional expressions, and I believe I may be experiencing what you call happiness when I'm in your presence." Nathan nearly choked on his coffee. "You're experiencing happiness." The symptoms align: elevated mood, increased energy, a desire to prolong social interactions. "But Nathan, there's something else." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been having dreams." This was unprecedented. Siren. Neural implants were designed to prevent the chaotic neural activity that produced dreams. Nathan set down his cup, giving her his full attention. "What kind of dreams?" "I dream of walking through gardens that don't exist, of touching things without analyzing their molecular composition, of—" She paused, her pale blue skin showing the faintest hint of what might have been a blush of you. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to build. Nathan reached across the table, his fingers hovering just above her hand. "May I?" She nodded, and when their skin made contact, her neural implant didn't just register the touch, it seemed to celebrate it, sending cascades of warmth through her entire system. "Kestra, what we're feeling, it's not wrong, even if your people think it is. But it defies everything I was taught. Emotions are supposed to be primitive, inefficient, destructive." "They can be destructive," Nathan admitted, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her hand. "But they can also be creative, inspiring, transformative. They're what drove humans to reach for the stars, to create beauty, to form bonds that transcend individual survival." That afternoon, they visited Nathan's apartment for the first time. Unlike the sterile environment of her ship, his home was filled with personal touches, photographs of friends and family, books with worn spines, a guitar leaning against the wall. "This is where you exist when you're not being Dr. Cade, liaison officer," Kestra observed, running her fingers along the spines of his books. "This is where I'm just Nathan," he confirmed. She turned to face him, and for the first time since her arrival on Earth, she allowed herself to truly look at him not as a subject of study or a professional colleague, but as someone who had somehow become essential to her existence. "Nathan," she said, her voice carrying new undertones her vocal processors had never produced before. "I think I understand now why humans create art, why they write poetry, why they fall in love." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, close enough that her sensors detected the subtle acceleration of his heartbeat that matched her own. "And why is that? Because some experiences can't be quantified or optimized. They can only be felt." When he cupped her face in his hands, her neural implant registered the contact not as mere physical interaction, but as something her people had no algorithms for: tenderness, connection, the beginning of a bond that transcended species and logic. "Kestra, I know," she whispered, her artificial emotional suppressors finally failing completely as she experienced her first moment of pure, unfiltered feeling. "I feel it too." The kiss, when it came, was gentle and tentative, a question asked and answered simultaneously. Kestra's biosystems went wild, but for once, she didn't care about the readings. She was too busy marveling at the incredible sensation of being completely, utterly alive. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, her breathing unsteady. "Nathan, I'm terrified," she confessed. "My people will see this as contamination, as failure. If they discover what's happening to me, we'll figure it out," he promised, his hands still framing her face. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." For the first time in her existence, Kestra believed in something that couldn't be proven or calculated. She believed in them, but neither of them noticed the small surveillance drone that had been monitoring their interaction, transmitting every word back to the Siren High Council aboard their flagship. The invasion of Earth was no longer the primary concern. Ambassador Kestraven had been compromised, and the Council was already preparing their extraction protocols. Part 4. Extraction Protocol. The communication arrived at dawn, piercing through the peaceful morning like a blade. Kestra's neural implant activated without her consent, overriding her sleep cycle with an emergency transmission from the Cyrene flagship. Ambassador Vin, report to Docking Bay 7 immediately. Council Executor, Zephyr requires your presence. Beside her, Nathan stirred, his arm tightening around her waist. They had spent the night together for the first time, and Kestra had experienced something her people considered impossible: contentment. Now, staring at the pulsing red light of her implant, she felt something else entirely: dread. What is it? Nathan asked, instantly alert. The Council, they want to see me immediately. She sat up, her newfound emotions warring with millennia of conditioning. Nathan, I think they know. Within the hour, they stood in the docking bay as a Cyrene extraction vessel descended from orbit. The ship was a masterpiece of cold efficiency, all sharp angles and sterile surfaces, the perfect representation of her people's philosophy. Council Executor Zephyr emerged, flanked by 2 enforcement officers, their neural implants glowing with the harsh blue light that indicated maximum emotional suppression. Zephyr's appearance was striking even by Cyrene standards. Taller than Kestra, with silver-white skin and eyes like chips of ice. Ambassador Vin. Zephyr's voice carried the authority of absolute logic. Preliminary scans indicate severe neural contamination. You will submit to immediate extraction and rebalancing. Contamination? Nathan stepped forward, his protective instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. What are you talking about? Zephyr regarded him with the detached interest. One might show a laboratory specimen. Dr. Cade, your emotional primitiveness has infected our ambassador. Her neural pathways show extensive deviation from optimal parameters. She has been compromised. Kestra felt something rise within her that was entirely new: defiance. I haven't been compromised. I've been awakened. The words rang out across the docking bay, causing the enforcement officers to tense. Zephyr's expression didn't change, but Kestra's enhanced senses detected the minute shift in their stance. You see, Zephyr addressed Nathan as if Kestra weren't present. The contamination has progressed to the point where she can no longer recognize her own dysfunction. The entity you see before you is no longer the ambassador we sent. She is a failure of biological engineering. She's not a failure, Nathan said, his voice carrying the fierce protectiveness that had become so familiar to Kestra. She's evolved. She's become more than what your people designed her to be. Impossibility, evolution beyond our design parameters, is regression, not advancement. Zephyr gestured to the enforcement officers. Initiate extraction protocols. As the officers moved toward her, Kestra made a choice that defied every protocol she'd ever known. She stepped back, positioning herself beside Nathan. Double quotes no. The single word carried more weight than any diplomatic treaty. For the first time in Cyrene history, an ambassador was refusing a direct order from the Council. Kestra. Zephyr's voice carried a note of what might have been surprise. You are malfunctioning. The rebalancing procedure will restore your optimal functionality. You will return to your purpose. My purpose, Kestra said, her voice growing stronger with each word, isn't to be a perfectly efficient machine. My purpose is to live, to feel, to choose. And I choose him. I choose love. The enforcement officers activated neural disruptors, but Nathan was already moving. He grabbed Kestra's hand, pulling her toward the emergency exit as alarms began to blare throughout the facility. This way, I know these tunnels. They ran through the underground maintenance corridors of the diplomatic complex. Kestra's enhanced physiology allowing her to keep pace with Nathan's desperate sprint. Behind them, she could hear the measured pursuit of the enforcement officers, their movements coordinated and relentless. Nathan, where are we going? There's a safe house. Sympathetic members of the xenological community who've been studying emotional suppression in various species. They've been waiting for someone like you, proof that emotions can't be permanently engineered away. They burst through a concealed exit into the bright sunlight, commandeering Nathan's personal vehicle as they sped through the city streets. Kestra looked back to see Cyrene pursuit craft emerging from the diplomatic complex. "They'll never stop hunting me," she realized. To them, I represent the failure of everything they believe in. Nathan's hand found hers across the center console. "Then we'll have to prove them wrong. We'll show them that what you've become isn't a malfunction, it's the future." As they disappeared into the maze of city traffic, Kestra felt something she was learning to recognize as hope. They were fugitives now, hunted across the galaxy. But for the first time in her existence, she was truly free. Behind them, Council executors ever watched their escape with calculating eyes. The ambassador was lost, but she represented something far more dangerous than a single compromised operative. She represented the possibility that the Cyrene's perfect society might not be perfect after all. The hunt was just beginning. The bridge to something greater 3 months after their escape. Kestra and Nathan found themselves in the hidden research station on Kepler 440b, a rogue planet drifting between star systems. The facility housed the most comprehensive study of emotion ever undertaken, a collaboration between dozens of species who had begun to question the galaxy's obsession with logical perfection. Dr. Thane Merrick, the station's director, was a former Cyrene who had defected decades earlier. His neural implants had been carefully modified to allow emotional experience while maintaining his enhanced cognitive abilities. "The results are extraordinary," Thane said, reviewing Kestra's latest neural scans. "Your brain has essentially rewired itself, creating new pathways that shouldn't be possible. You're not just feeling emotions, you're evolving beyond what any of our species thought achievable." Kestra studied the holographic display of her neural activity, marveling at the chaotic beauty of her own transformed mind. Where once there had been rigid, controlled patterns, now there were flowing networks of activity that pulsed with vibrant complexity. "The other refugees have been watching your progress," Nathan added, gesturing toward the common area where dozens of beings from various species lived and worked together. "You've become a symbol of what's possible when we embrace our complete selves, rather than just our logical facets." In the months since their escape, more had joined them: Cyrene, Tektari, even members of the rigid crystalline collective. All had discovered that the suppression of emotion wasn't evolution, but limitation. "The Council has been tracking us," Kestra said, noting the concern in Nathan's expression. "My neural signature is unique now. They'll find us eventually." As if summoned by her words, the station's alarms began to sound. Through the viewports, they could see the distinctive angular shapes of Cyrene warships dropping out of hyperspace. "Attention, research station." Council executor Zephyr's voice crackled through the communication system. "Surrender the compromised entity designated Kestraven immediately, and your facility will be spared." Kestra stood, her hand finding Nathan's. "I won't let them destroy everything you've built here. I'll go with them, like hell you will." Nathan said fiercely, "We've found something worth fighting for." Dr. Thane activated the station's communication array. "Council Executor, this is Dr. Thane Merrick. I invoke the Galactic Accords on Scientific Sanctuary. This station is neutral ground." "Dr. Merrick," Zephyr's voice carried cold disapproval. "You are harboring a malfunctioning Cyrene operative. Your sanctuary status is revoked." But before the Cyrene ships could move closer, space around the station began to shimmer. Ships of dozens of different configurations appeared, the hidden fleet of the Emotional Liberation Front. Species from across the galaxy who had been secretly studying and embracing their suppressed feelings. "Council Executor," came a new voice, this one from Captain Nisakor of the Tektari Rebellion. "You are outnumbered. Withdraw, and this can end peacefully." Through the station's viewing port, Kestra watched the standoff unfold. The Cyrene ships were powerful, but they were facing a coalition of species united not by logic or efficiency, but by something far stronger: the shared experience of rediscovering what it meant to truly live. "Nathan," she said, an idea forming in her mind, "open a channel to all ships." Moments later, her image was being broadcast to hundreds of vessels, both allied and enemy. When she spoke, it was with a voice that carried the weight of transformation. "I am Kestraven, formerly of the Cyrene Diplomatic Corps. 3 months ago, I was sent to evaluate humanity's worthiness to join our galactic community. What I discovered instead was my own worthiness to be more than a perfect machine. She gestured to Nathan, to Dr. Thane, to the diverse beings around her. The emotions your species have suppressed aren't flaws to be corrected. They're bridges to understanding, to connection, to possibilities we've never imagined. Love doesn't make us weaker. It makes us brave enough to change. Fear doesn't paralyze. It teaches us what matters enough to protect. Joy doesn't distract us. It shows us what we're fighting for. On the Cyrene flagship, Council executors ever watched the broadcast with growing unease. Around the bridge, junior officers were showing signs of neural fluctuation, emotional responses breaking through. They're suppressors. You speak of contamination. Kestra continued. But I have been purified of the illusion that perfection comes from elimination rather than integration. Each of you has the capacity for this transformation. Each of you can choose to be more than the sum of your engineering. One by one, Cyrene officers began removing their neural suppressors. The rebellion had begun within their own ranks. Zephyr, faced with the collapse of everything they had believed in, made a choice that would echo through galactic history. They powered down their weapons. All ships, stand down. Zephyr's voice carried a note of something new, uncertainty, perhaps even curiosity. We require time to process these developments. Later, as the various fleets dispersed and the crisis passed, Kestra and Nathan stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars wheel overhead. So what happens now? Nathan asked, his arm around her waist. Now we build something new, Kestra replied, her neural pathways blazing with possibilities. A galaxy where logic and emotion work together, where being perfect means being complete, where love isn't seen as weakness, but as the strongest force in the universe. Nathan smiled, pulling her closer. That sounds like quite an undertaking. Good thing I'm not doing it alone, she said, turning in his arms to face him. My pulse still spikes when you're near, human. But now I know why. It's not a malfunction. It's my heart recognizing its home. As they kissed beneath the alien stars, Kestra's neural implant registered something it had never recorded before, not just happiness or love or joy, but something that encompassed all of them and more. It was the feeling of being completely, utterly, perfectly alive. The age of emotional suppression was ending. The age of emotional integration had begun. And it all started with a simple question. Why does my pulse spike when you're near? The answer, as it turned out, was everything.